Okay, it looks like we've got quite a few people on, so we'll have more people joining us as we go along, but I want to welcome everybody to this Restart Kentucky webinar with the Kentucky Chamber in partnership with KCTCS, the Community and Technical College System. I'm Jacqueline Pitts. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Kentucky Chamber, and today I am joined by Senate Majority Leader Damon Thayer, and we are going to have a very spirited discussion. I joked with him beforehand that I might just say, okay, Damon, go ahead, but I will ask you some questions. So we're gonna get started with the main news of the week here at the state level. The governor put out a recommendation that schools wait until September 28th to start in-person learning. So Damon, what are you hearing from your constituents on this recommendation? And how do we ensure accountability so that our students don't start falling behind as they're learning from home?
Well, let me start out by saying thanks for having me on. I enjoy these kinds of things, and I'm happy to do them whenever you'd like. I think the governor made a terrible decision. I'm sure it's going to result in plummeting approval ratings for him. They were already down 20 points. Wouldn't surprise me if he's underwater by the end of the week, because what I'm hearing is anger, frustration, a lot of tears from parents who are going to have to try to figure out what to do with their kids, from single moms who are trying to work to parents who both parents work outside of the home. It's a mess. And you've had these school districts and superintendents working for months now to try to get ready to open, and they had plans to do a choice between virtual and in-person learning. Even the CDC said that it's more important to get kids back into school. And I'm a supporter of the in-person option, but obviously if some parents want to keep their kids home, because there's certainly a lot of fear mongering out there amongst about the virus, and people are scared, that's an option. That was an option in Scott County, for example. But yesterday the governor basically shut down schools with what he called a recommendation. But I want to read a quote from the KDE that is being distributed amongst the school boards and superintendents today. Quote, "There will be consequences for defying the governor's recommendations." That doesn't sound like a recommendation. That sounds like we're living in some sort of autocratic society where the locals we already know that the legislature is not being involved in this. Now we've got local control being usurped by the governor. And let me just give you a few words that I'm hearing to describe the governor. Some of these I've used myself, and some I'm getting from my constituents.
Now, are these appropriate for a webinar if you've been using them too?
They're absolutely rated G,
Okay.
but they are right out of Roget's Thesaurus that I learned in my Writing from Reason class back in 11th grade. Arbitrary, capricious, oppressive, unreasonable. Here are some words. Those are adjectives used to describe his actions. Now here's some words people are using to describe the governor: tyrant, king, emperor. And then here are some verbs that I'm hearing from people regarding actions that they'd like the legislature to take: impeach, recall. Now, we don't have a recall provision in Kentucky election law, so that one's off the table. But more and more, I'm getting emails and messages and phone calls from people who want the House to take up impeachment proceedings in January. And that's how bad this has gotten. I think in the beginning, people were willing to give the governor the benefit of the doubt because this was a once every 100-year pandemic. I was measured in my comments about him. I thought that in the beginning he did a pretty good job. But now this decision-making process that he's using, it's like rules for thee and not for me. People are very frustrated, and now, from bars and restaurants being targeted to small businesses being shut down, and now to him backtracking on what he recommended on schools to basically shut down public schools. People are pretty darn upset. They're hot under the collar.
And I want to come back to the executive order powers and where we're at with that and what you expect during session. But you know, a lot of people are talking about, especially within the business community that's concerned about the future workforce, how we make sure that students aren't falling behind, how we have some sort of accountability, especially while parents are at home doing their full-time job and then teaching their kids at home as well. So is there any way, or is the legislature starting to think about any way that we can start to monitor progress or anything like that during this pandemic?
Well, we all know that the summer slide is a real thing. Well, how about the spring, summer, and fall slide? I think the governor is doing long-lasting damage to our kids. And think about those at the lower end of the income spectrum, those who maybe have special needs or speech therapy issues to deal with. There are some of these students, I mean, there were estimates that as many as 20 or 25% just never showed up last spring during the shutdown. These kids are going to take years to get caught up. I mean, the way education is structured is the building blocks year over year and building upon what they've learned. So many kids fell behind in the spring and are now going to do that. And I know that the schools are going to try very hard with virtual instruction. And I've seen some really interesting technology, and I know that our teachers can adapt. But I think we can all agree that the best case scenario is in-person instruction, where teachers can engage with students. And that's not going to happen for a while in Kentucky, at least. And I don't know about how we're going to monitor it. I guess we're going to have to rely on the Kentucky Department of Education. And frankly, I don't have a lot of faith and confidence in them, because right now they're the bullies out there trying to implement the intimidation tactics by the governor's recommendation. But let's call it what it is. It's an edict. It's an order, because there are all these threats being layered out to our school districts. Even last night, late last night, I was getting text messages about these kinds of threats and intimidation that the KDE is using to enforce the governor's edict. But you're right, we're going to have to figure out a way to track it.
So let's move on to the executive order powers. So a lot of the decisions and mandates have been challenged in court. They were about to be kind of overturned by a Northern Kentucky judge, and then the Supreme Court stepped in. And so we're still waiting for a full hearing by the Supreme Court about the executive order powers. So what do you expect to come out of that hearing? And if they're not reined in, executive order powers, what do you expect that the legislature will do once session reconvenes?
So that's like a three-part question. So let's take the first part. The governor has yet to win in court. Federal court and state courts at the district and circuit level, he's lost every step of the way. He is absolutely throwing out the Constitution whenever he can, and that's been pretty clear. Secondly, I don't know what the Supreme Court will do. I don't have a lot of faith in them making the right decision. They've made a lot of bad decisions in recent years, decisions that they will have to stand for when they run for re-election, because I think people are more woke when it comes to and I hate that term, by the way, but people are certainly more engaged in seeing how our courts can affect our lives and the balance of power that we have in Kentucky. So I suspect that they will end up supporting the governor. They did support him when he was Attorney General with their incredibly wrong-headed decision on Senate Bill 150. Had to get that little shot in there. And so the third thing then is, what will the legislature do? Well, I can tell you there is broad support for reining in this governor and future governors' ability to extend sort of in perpetuity these executive orders relating to a state of emergency. I think when the General Assembly passed the current law relating to a state of emergency in 1998, they were thinking about natural disasters like ice storms, floods, and tornadoes, and things like that. Certainly nobody could have envisioned this once every 100 years pandemic that we're in today. But I don't think one person should have this much power. And I think what people have become very aware of, unfortunately, is that when the General Assembly is not in session, we are powerless to stop him. And so with the courts essentially shut down for months and the legislature not in session, there is no co-equal branches of government and no balance of power. and we basically have an autocracy with one man in charge making those decisions. And he, unlike other governors, chose to ignore the General Assembly in terms of A, informing us about what's going on, and B, getting feedback from us, because we're a lot closer to the people, and could have shared that information with him, but he had no inclination to do so. So you've seen that Representative Savannah Maddox in the House and Senator Matt Caslin in the Senate have both pre-filed bills that would limit the number of days that a state of emergency could exist. Representative Maddox is for 15 days. Senator Caslin's was modeled after the Utah statute for 30 days. And then both would require that the General Assembly be called into session, and it would have to vote to agree with the governor to extend in a state of emergency. So I think eventually what will happen is the House and Senate leadership will get together, and we will decide on 15 days, 30 days, something in the middle, and then move forward on a bill. And we will probably move it fast and furious during the first week of the General Assembly. And then, of course, the governor will veto it, and then we will come back again and override the veto. And it may also be coupled with an end to the current state of emergency, because I don't see him ending that anytime soon, unfortunately, and I think he should. Also, there is a bill that Speaker Osborne has offered that would be a constitutional amendment that would allow the General Assembly to call itself into session. Many other states allow that, and there is broad support for that. So, I've seen some recent polling. There is broad support for the governor's mask mandate. Okay, fine, let's do that. I've got my mask today, my Team Mitch mask, just so everybody knows where I stand, just in case I need it to walk down to the Annex cafeteria at lunch, and I will wear it. But there's also broad support for reining in executive branch power. And I think you're going to see us take those steps pretty quickly and decisively in January, assuming that he will veto it, and then we will come back in and override that veto, just like we did about a dozen or so of his vetoes back in April.
And like you said, there's a couple things already pre-filed, but I think, and those are good examples of things that you guys could do, but I think a lot of people are wondering what all you guys can do in terms of reining in his powers. Like, where does it stop in terms of what you can do to rein that in? So what all are you legally able to do? Well,
we have the statutes, and the statute that he's working under right now was passed in 1998. Except for very limited powers for each executive branch office as prescribed in the Constitution, the framers of our Constitution gave that power to the legislature to decide the powers of the executive branch: the governor, lieutenant governor, the agriculture commissioner. By the way, my bill that I've had during Republican administrations and Democrat administrations that would move the governor's office of ag policy back to the Department of Agriculture, that bill has never moved in the past. I think you may see that there might be some impetus behind passing such a bill, because I don't know if you know this, but it's no longer called the governor's office of ag policy. It's called Andy Beshear's office of ag policy. So that might be something else that we can look at doing, and put agriculture where it belongs. Take it away from the governor's office where it's currently being politicized, and put it in the agriculture department where it belongs. That, and it makes has a lot of influence over where these ag development funds go. So it's being politicized right now, and we need to probably end that. But I think we have a lot of power when we're in session to limit all of the executive branch offices. And I think you're going to see us do that. We'll probably take a look at executive orders, administrative regulations. Under the Bevin administration, our own party's governor, we made it harder for administrative regulations to be passed. We extended the comment period and the time that was allowed for those to go into effect. And I think that's something we need to look at too, because when we're not here, the governor governs by order and regulation. By the way, I have a special guest who just showed up. Look at this. You never know who's going to show up. Look, our caucus chair,
Senator Julie Rocky Adams.
Our caucus chair and my BFF.
Have a great meeting.
Thank you so much. I'll try and keep Damon under control.
Yeah, see you at lunch. See you at lunch, Madam Chair.
Schools are open.
Catholic schools are open.
All 4 dioceses in Kentucky announced their opening.
Senator Adams reports that all 4 dioceses Dioceses are, and I'm Catholic and I can't even pronounce the word. It is a tough word.
Yeah.
Anyway, Catholic schools going to open. Good choice. Good choice. Hats off to the bishops making a good decision there. See, you never know when you
never know.
When you tune into a chamber Zoom, you get special guests, you get breaking news. And by the way, I'm going to take a drink from my plastic straw while I can, because if Kamala Harris becomes acting president, she's going to outlaw those plastic straws. So I'm going to enjoy mine while I can.
And we will get there. But
by the way, she ain't going to be acting president or vice president. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word ain't. Back when I was in Catholic school, every time we used the word ain't, we had to put a quarter in a jar. No, I didn't. I never got my wrist slapped by a nun. I know someone out there is probably wondering about that.
We're getting a little off track here, Damon. So let's break.
Well, you know.
So
you know that's going to happen with me.
I do. So let's talk about the end of session. So we talked about a lot of things that you guys want to do in session next year, but at the end of this past session in 2020, there were a lot of changes. Most of the House was not in the chambers themselves, a lot of different ways to vote and things like that. If things continue the way that they are, and we continue to see more regulations, a rise in cases, so on and so forth, how do you expect session to look? Do you expect that everyone will go back, and can you tackle the big issues if everybody's not?
I can't answer that. I mean, we're sitting here at almost the middle of August. I can't predict what's going to happen in early January. I would hope by then we've got a vaccine, people are feeling less afraid, and we can go back to normal. I can tell you, I plan to be at my desk on the Senate floor on the first day of session. And that's about all that I can tell you. We haven't even really talked about physically what it will look like in terms of voting. We use social distancing there at the end of session. The House has more members, so they allowed people to vote from their offices. I hope we don't have to do that, but I can't predict what it will look like then.
And in 2021, you guys have a lot of big issues to tackle, including the second year of the budget, redistricting, and a lot of other things. But what are some of the most important things that are being talked about in the interim in the legislature right now?
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about the effect of COVID-19 on various sectors. I would say 70, 80% of the committee topics have dealt with that. So, we've got unemployment insurance that we've got to deal with to make sure that it doesn't provide an onerous effect on businesses because that's where the money comes from, folks, as you all know. And we've got to make sure that we don't have an outsized negative effect on businesses going forward to pay for all these unemployment insurance claims. Liability reform for businesses due to COVID. And I'll tell you something else. This is a little bit of a scoop. We're looking at the possibility of providing liability insurance for schools that open up for in-person instruction and potentially requiring that the KDE help them with their funding if they are in a litigation scenario from going back to school. And by the way, I want to give some props to a school in my district, Williamstown Independent in Grant County. The school board voted last night to move forward with its plan, which gives parents a choice between in-person instruction and virtual instruction. Now, a majority of parents in Grant County that use Williamstown Independent want to send their kids back to school. I think 20 or 25% wanted the virtual opportunity, and they're going to move forward with their plan. I heard that Oldham County was thinking of that and Warren was thinking of that. And I certainly want to give full respect and support to school districts and school boards and superintendents that are listening to parents and students and trying to get back open for in-person instruction.
And a couple of those issues that you talked about are the exact things that were my next questions, because they're the biggest issues facing the business community as we move forward, and that is the rise in unemployment insurance costs and legal liability protections, because those are two things that are going to end up costing businesses a lot of money. In terms of UI, we've been through this before. With the recession, there was a task force that came up with some recommendations. You all passed some bills. So, but what do you think a solution on unemployment insurance could look like to ensure that businesses don't see their rates skyrocket?
We're in the early days, Jacqueline. I can't really answer that, but what I will tell you is that we will work with the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce and its regional affiliates and its members to try to reach a solution that makes sense for businesses across Kentucky. We recognize that the UI issue and that the liability issue due to COVID are huge issues facing businesses, and we want to work with you to try to come up with a solution.
So, okay, I'm going to let you talk about the presidential race now. We had other week with the presidential race. So do you think that the pick of Kamala Harris makes a big difference in that race? And do you have any different expectations since the last time that you and I spoke on a webinar about this race?
Well, I think Joe Biden just locked down California and New York. So congratulations to Sleepy Joe for that big announcement. Now, I'm underwhelmed by the pick. She's ranked as the most liberal member of the United States Senate. She was clearly rejected by the Democratic Party during the primaries. And it's interesting that on the one bipartisan issue that exists in America today, criminal justice reform, she is way outside the mainstream on this. I mean, when she was Attorney General in California over there in the the Republic of California, she locked up more people for nonviolent crimes than just about anybody in public office today. And I think that's going to be an issue for her. And I really feel very good about President Trump's reelection chances, better today than I did a month ago. He seems to be a bit more disciplined for him in his messaging. And even though I'm not a big fan of executive orders, no matter who's in charge, Republican or Democrat, I think with the stalemate in Congress over the next stimulus, I think the fact that he was willing to take action, again, not a fan of executive orders, but I do think that that America will reward him for his leadership in trying to move forward on some of these situations. Now, I'm a movie buff, I'm an entertainment buff, and I'm not sure if I should compare Joe Biden to the Manchurian Candidate or Robert Redford's character in the movie The Candidate, who at the end of the movie looked at his handlers after he won the U.S. Senate race in California and said, "What do we do now?" Because if he were to happen to win, I'm sure that would be Sleepy Joe's reaction. What do we do now? And the response would, you do nothing, Mr. President, because Kamala is in charge now. So take your pick from my movie selections. By the way, a great movie to watch during the COVID, Escape from New York, because apparently that's what people are trying to do these days.
Let's talk about the other elections that are happening this fall. We still have elections here at the state level. That's what you and I talked about last time we did a webinar together. Any new thoughts or predictions in terms of how some of these races are going to go? Obviously, we had a couple really competitive primaries, some interesting results out of those. So kind of give us an update on what you're seeing in those races.
Let me briefly say for the House of Representatives, which currently has a 62-member Republican supermajority, my number is 68 Republicans. When we return in January, you can take the over or the under. My prediction is 68. I think Speaker Osborne's going to come back with the largest Republican supermajority in Kentucky history. We took one on the chin with the special election in June in the Senate. It was the first time in 10 years that we had lost a seat held by a Republican. But I really think what happened there is our candidate, Bill Furco, who was a great candidate, really got beat by Charles Booker. Nobody could have predicted the Booker surge during the last 3 weeks of the race. And it gave Democrats in the Jefferson County part of the district a reason to vote, and Republicans didn't. So in Jefferson County, we saw 17,500 Democrats vote and only 6,500 Republicans. So that was a loss. And, it happens now and then. We feel good about getting that seat back in 2 years, depending on how it looks after redistricting. But we're at 28-10, and we're feeling really good. I'm up for re-election. I'm, running an aggressive race as I always have. This is the first time in my life that I'm running in a district that has more registered Republicans than Democrats. Senator Philip Wheeler running for re-election First time after a special, like I did, he has to do what I call the serve and return, where you win one year and have to come back and run again the next. He's looking really good. The president's super strong in his district. Senator Chris McDaniel up in Northern Kentucky, a suburban district. We feel like he's in much better shape than we were thinking, because Matt Bevin lost that district, but Senator McDaniel, very strong, right on the issues up there, and his position as budget committee chairman really works well for him. We think we've got a chance at 2 pickups. Here, the open seat in District 7, which is Franklin, Woodford, Anderson, Gallatin, and Owen counties. We think we have a good chance to pick up that seat. It's an open seat. And then we also think we have a shot to pick up a seat in the East, the seat currently held by Senator Johnny Ray Turner. He's running against a Republican named Johnny L. Turner, in a district where President Trump, Senator McConnell, and Congressman Rogers are off the charts popular and will win with huge, huge landslides. And the coattail effect, as well as the name ID situation there, we think puts that race on our radar screen. And I, you know, my team, Mitch Mask,
That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
I predict he will win a bigger landslide than he did against Allison Lundergan Grimes 6 years ago. Mark it down. I think that was 15.5 points. So, okay, my number is 16 or bigger. I think that race is over, to be honest with you.
We have about 3 minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want people to know about, especially on legislative issues or coronavirus or anything like that?
You know, I want to speak up on behalf of the bars and restaurants of Kentucky that I think have been unfairly targeted by the governor. And apparently now the governor has decided that the virus is like Freddy Krueger. You know, he doesn't come out until after dark. You know, virus isn't there at 9:59, but 10 o'clock, boy, that virus is out in force. And I think it's unfair to say that the rise in positivity is attributed to the bars and restaurants. I mean, who knows? It could be due to people going to the beaches of South Carolina, which the governor said don't go, and maybe not quarantining long enough when they get home. Who knows? But I think the target bars and restaurants has been one of the worst things to come out of this. And people are pretty upset about it. I'm glad they're back at 50% capacity, but slipping back down to 25% and closing the bars for a while. You know, I gave credit to the Democrat governor of Nevada yesterday, Governor Sisolak, who's taking a scalpel approach, not a one-size-fits-all. And that's probably my biggest complaint about Governor Beshear's approach. In my district, I have a 0% positivity rate in Grant County, 1% in Scott County, and 4% in Kenton County. And most of that's probably from the northern part in Senator McDaniel's district in the urban area. The rural area in my part is probably less than that. The Democrat governor of Nevada is going after the bad actors, but Governor Beshear is punishing the many for the sins of the few. And I wish he would look to other states, call up some of his Democrat friends. Also, the governor of Colorado is doing a good job, and he's a Democrat. And let's take a scalpel approach and not this one size fits all. It's really a problem, and it's going to make our recovery longer. But we are working in a fashion to be prepared in January, to take the kind of steps necessary to protect businesses and do our part to help assist in the recovery so we can get back to the vibrant economy that we had before the pandemic hit.
All right, I think that's a great place to wrap up. So I want to thank you, Majority Leader Thayer, for joining us.
Guard your plastic straws.
And remind everybody to keep watching for your Restart Kentucky emails that we're sending each week to sign up for our upcoming webinars. We will keep having these good spirited discussions throughout the next couple of months. So make sure you're registering, and thank you again, Leader Thayer.
You know you're always going to get a certain level of snark and sarcasm when you have me on, especially in a week like this.
We always look forward to it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.